I'm Steve Reick. I'm state representative for the 63rd District in McHenry County. And as many of you know, if you've been to these press conferences before and have followed anything I've been doing, you know that I have been working for the past 5 years to try to do something about fixing the problem that is the Department of Children and Family Services. Unfortunately, this week we were confronted with an audit of DCFS from the Illinois Auditor General, where the Auditor General issued an adverse opinion on the department's compliance with specified requirements of their examination. As one who used to be an auditor, this is the worst thing that can be said by an auditor about any entity that it's examining. An adverse opinion, according to the standards that are established for issuing such an opinion, says that the practitioner, the auditor, should express an adverse opinion when the practitioner, having obtained sufficient appropriate evidence, concludes that misstatements, individually or in the aggregate, are both material and pervasive to the subject matter. Basically, what that means is that they've been lied to. Things have been hidden. They've had to ferret them out. And what they have found, what the auditors have found, is damning enough for them to say they cannot issue an opinion on that agency or that entity that gives us any hope that it's redeemable. If it's a financial audit, that's one thing. It usually shows that the company is on its last legs and is probably not going to be around anymore. But what we have here is an audit of an agency that takes its responsibilities so lightly that we're leaving abused and neglected children in our wake. This cannot be allowed to stand. There are many egregious failures noted in the audit. First, there are 33 separate findings, of which 17 are Category 1 findings, which disclose material weaknesses in internal control or material non-compliance with state laws and regulations. I'll give you a couple of examples. 1, 100% of reported suspected abuse or neglect of a child while receiving care in a hospital were delayed from anywhere from 34 to 885 days from the investigation date. The agency's response that there was no mechanism to monitor and track field investigators' notifications due to employee oversight. Here's another one. 96% of indicated sexual abuse notifications to schools were up to 908 days late. The agency responded that investigators were reluctant to violate a private family matter. I got a phone call this morning about a high school in my district where this is going on. This hasn't stopped just because the auditor said it, the agency said it would. 22% of employee evaluations were not done and have been out of compliance since 2008. The agency's response: completing evaluations is not tied to supervisors' salary increases. So if your salary is safe and your increases are guaranteed, you don't have to worry about employee evaluations. Here's one that as a member of JCAR, I'm working on right now. 43% of daycare provider licensing reports were not reviewed. The agency said it was due to a lack of resources. This audit report is full of things like this, and the constant drumbeat of excuses by the agency is what can be expected from this agency, having been dealing with them for the past 5 years. Lack of resources, turnover, workforce changes, and limited knowledge base. Competing priorities, making it impossible to reach out-of-state providers. Staffing leadership changes, employee turnover, lack of training, staffing issues, delay in issuance of employee credentials, retirements, employees working from home, lack of facility managers, and COVID. These are not reasons, these are excuses, and these excuses are not good enough. If the agency can agree with the recommendations all at once, and it agreed with all of the recommendations made in this audit. But until it starts to follow through on those recommendations, I'm not going to believe a word they have to say. I've been trying to reform this agency since 2019. This isn't new to me. And since I became minority spokesperson on the Adoption and Child Welfare Committee, I made it a point to try to work with this agency. I felt that by working with the agency instead of standing apart from it and doing nothing but criticize, I could help it navigate the changes it needs to be made for it to become an agency that's focused on its core mission of protecting children from abuse and neglect. The findings of this audit are a slap in the face. It's a slap in the face of everyone, Democrat, Republican, House or Senate, who's worked so hard to try to understand what's going on with this agency and what we can do to help. Many of you have sat in on press conferences where you've asked me, would I call for the director to resign or be fired? I've resisted that. I've resisted that simply because you could replace Mark Smith with Saint Germain Kazan, who's the patron saint of abused children, and nothing would change. Responsibility for this adverse opinion lies squarely at the feet of the governor. The years covered by this audit fall entirely within his administration. While he continues to try to blame previous administrations for the failure of this agency, he owns this. This has happened on his watch. He has full responsibility. He recently ridiculed Republicans for irrelevance in state government. Okay, Mr. Governor, you can't have it both ways. You can either say that we're irrelevant and then not take responsibility for failures such as this. He's been good at blaming Republicans for not going along with his agenda. But what he's really trying to do is to force us to share the blame for his administration's incompetence. He's left far too many abused and neglected children in his wake. It's time he, the governor, was held responsible for this. The gloves are off. If this is the kind of response we're going to get from an agency that feels like it has no reason to work with us because it knows that it's going to be here long after we're gone, then I am not going to be silent about what I see are the shortcomings of this agency and what I think need to be done and what the Republicans need to be done. And believe it or not, there are a lot of Democrats who agree with me as well as to what needs to be done.
He said, can DCFS problems be solved with the current director? What would changing directors accomplish? Can the state's child welfare system ever work as is?
I think we've seen already too many examples of an agency that thinks that it has all the answers, but consistently falls short of everything that it is supposed to be doing in its mission. I think a lot of it has to do with mission creep that's established over the years, and the DCFS taking on responsibilities such as Representative Howder so aptly put, licensing of daycare facilities and daycare workers. That's not a job that DCFS should be doing. Background checks, which take months sometimes in cases of try to get CASA volunteers. It's done. So no. This is not an agency that is redeemable in its current form. Back in this last General Assembly, in the 101st General Assembly, I proposed a bill, I believe it was HB 4886, that established a pilot program to be established here in McHenry County along the lines of a judicial circuit, creating a separate child welfare agency that dealt specifically with child welfare issues within McHenry County. The solution is here. It is in the local areas. Judicial circuits are the proper way to define the boundaries of a child welfare agency because everything ends up in the court system eventually. Let's let the courts define the boundaries of a child welfare agency. Local cops, teachers, doctors, healthcare workers, they know what's going on in these areas. They know what's going on in their jurisdictions. They see it every day. But when you have an agency that is so hidebound and regulation at the top end that requires everything to be run through a central location, you lose the benefit of speed and the ability to take a child out of a harmful situation. No, we cannot fix this agency as it is currently constituted. The director, whoever he or she is or may soon be, has a responsibility to go to the governor and say, Governor, this isn't working. Part of what you hired me to do was to fix this mess. And it has not been done. And honest to God, I don't see it being done anytime soon, because I don't see what has the governor said about this audit? It was issued on Monday. Today's Friday. He has said nothing. That tells me right there that this is not on his radar. These kinds of things are falling through the cracks of this administration, and it has got to stop.
What have been your takeaways from the trials of AJ Friend's DCFS workers? Has the trial exposed any new ideas of legislation to address problems at the agency?
Well, since the trial is taking place up in my county, I guess I should respond to this, but I'm not going to respond to it because there has been no decision made by the judge. It was a bench trial. It was not a jury trial. And so I think it's inappropriate to comment on this specific case. But what I will say is the fact that this is an agency. This is an agency that should be on trial. There are too many things wrong with this agency that led to the death of AJ Friend and a whole lot of other kids over the past 5 years. And until we clean up this agency, until we do something bold, until we do something that actually puts the needs of abused and neglected children first, we're not going to get anywhere, and we're going to end up with this kind of wreckage for years to come. So I'm not going to speak on this particular case, but the fact is that this is a problem that needs to be addressed by the agency as a whole, and I just don't see it happening.
Isn't it time to see a bipartisan omnibus bill to address all the issues within DCFS?
Well, okay, once again, bipartisan, yeah. I had a bill, like I said, I had a bill in the 101st General Assembly that set up a pilot program to make a child welfare system bound by county or judicial circuit lines. It was bipartisan. I had 17 co-sponsors. I had Democrats on that bill. There isn't one representative in the Illinois House of Representatives who doesn't have an issue with DCFS in his or her district. I am getting phone calls from the north part of this state to Cairo, from Rock Island to Danville. I get calls. My office gets calls. I'm the go-to guy that people call because they know I'm going to pick up the phone, that I'm going to answer an email, that I'm going to do something about this. Until everybody in the General Assembly decides we're going to pull the oars in the same direction, and we're going to take this agency apart, root and branch, and fix it so that kids are not left hanging out to dry, so that kids aren't left in abusive homes where the agency isn't even reporting to local officials that these kinds of things are going on. We are not going to fix this. So what is our responsibility as a state? What is the responsibility of state government? It is to make our citizens safe. That is our first and foremost responsibility, is to maintain the public safety. And if you can't protect kids, how the hell are you going to protect anybody else? So that's basically all I have to say about that case.
Okay, and we did actually just get one more quick one in on DCFS. So the department was pointing to COVID and referring to that as the timepiece that was looked at during the audit. Do you have a reaction to them responding and pointing to COVID as some of the reasons of the findings in the audit report?
You know, okay, Illinois is rising and all this other stuff. There's something else that floats as well. So let's get that past us. But the problem is, as a member of JCAR, I'm seeing this in a specific instance dealing with licensing at DCFS. And Bill touched on it during his comments regarding licensing. During COVID, we had an awful lot of loosening of rules in order to allow staffing to continue and grow, and to allow business, not businesses, but like daycare, in my case, with JCAR, daycare centers, Bill dealing with people in the healthcare industry. We saw the loosening of these kinds of restrictions in order to expedite and to maintain the kind of services that we need to maintain here in the state. And once COVID was over, the clamps came back on. All of a sudden, we've got these restrictions, we've got these requirements, and all of a sudden, we're losing people. They're disappearing into the woodwork. So maybe it's time we sat back and looked at some of the things that came out of COVID with regard to our ability to bring people into agencies and things like that, that we can do again. Again, I'm dealing with this issue with licensing of certain daycare licensing issues with JCAR and DCFS, but this seems to be across most agencies. They seem to work reasonably well when left to their own devices and making the kind of accommodations they needed to make to keep the doors open, to keep families together, to keep hospitals going. Maybe it's time we started thinking about outside the box and thinking about what happened then. And maybe that ought to be the way we do this going forward.